He's Rob Schneider. He's here now. Rob, can't say how pleased I am that you could join us this evening. Let me ask you about the last bit of stand-up I saw you do, which was about the virus. I want to ask you about the virus because it's very fiendishly smart, this virus. It coincides with electoral cycles, yeah? Every time there's an election coming up, there's a new super viral form of this virus about to hit us, giving Joe Biden the opportunity to fight the next election from his basement as he fought the last election. Please tell us, is this real?
Well, it is. The new variant is called the election cycle variant, and it is ready to go. They're just waiting for the virus is just waiting for the primaries to start, and then that's going to kick in, especially if there's anyone in the Democratic Party that is going to gain any potential rivalry that gains momentum against Biden. Then the virus is going to kick into high gear. And that's what a really election viruses do. And if you listen to the CDC and Tony Fauci, they will tell you that the closer that the Democrats have a chance of losing the executive branch in the United States, the higher the virulency of the virus. So I'm glad you noticed, George. You're also
astonishing. I did. It was a wonderful piece of comedy. I urge everyone to watch it. Now, you alluded there to someone that we are both supporting for the presidency in the United States, Bobby Kennedy Jr., of whom, with one or two exceptions, I am entirely in concert and in awe, actually, of his qualifications to be president. And I don't mean dynastic ones, not at all. I don't believe actually in dynastic politics. But his grasp of world affairs, of domestic affairs, of Big Pharma affairs is such that I think both you and I were drawn ineluctably to him. Have I got that right? And what did you first see in Bobby Kennedy's candidature?
I've known Bobby Kennedy for years now, and he's a guy that was able to take literally a body of water, the Hudson River, which could light on fire 30 years ago, and he was able to take this and make it so fish could live again in it. So if he never accomplishes anything else in his life, that is a gigantic accomplishment. Now, he really, as a lawyer, understands the corruption at a really deep level, because in order to be able to do something like poison a large body of water or poison a large body of human beings, you really need to be in control of who was in charge of creating legislation and laws. And that is what Robert Kennedy wants to do. First thing, there's only two countries that have this incredible advantage for the pharmaceutical companies of having direct to consumer drug ads. So in other words, you can have a drug ad and then they'll see that, well, I want to take that. And they go right to their doctor. Now, my family, my mom's Filipino. She's passed away, God rest her soul. But she, on our Filipinos side, they're in nursing or doctors or both. And so there are 4 hospitals that our family has run in New Jersey. And basically, Dr. Lapid, my cousin, Dr. Renee Lapid, he said to me, look, when a patient comes in and they say, I want this drug, I saw it on TV. And if you try to talk them out of it, they say, well, I'll just go somewhere else and get it. And they'll go to another doctor, and there is no database. You would think by 2023, there'd be some database keeping track of all the drugs that each person is taking. And there isn't. So you have seniors that are taking between 7 and 12.5 different prescription drugs in America. Now, that is a tremendous amount of money. You have the United States spends more money on healthcare, on quote healthcare, on medicine than any other country in the world, and we have very unhealthy people. We had more people, percentage-wise, died in the United States of COVID, and it wasn't just because of the virulency of COVID. It's because of the virulency of obesity, of unhealthy people, of unhealthy food, that created a situation for something like that reminds me of what happened in England in the Industrial Revolution, 1857. You have in Manchester, England, where Marx's Frederick Engels, Marx's partner, was in Manchester, England, and he said he saw these people he described as white ghosts because the water was polluted. You had you had 14 families as much sharing one bathroom, so you had a real case of a possibility of something. He said the common cold will wipe out half of these people, and so that's really the situation where if you have healthy people, viruses and bacteria, they are not the enemy to mankind, they're a bridge. And if you are in homeostasis, if you are in a place where you have where you're healthy, then these things connect you and work things out with the world. They are not the enemy. And so you have kind of a misguided notion of what health is. And and unfortunately, it is completely polluted with corruption, because the pharmaceutical companies, they are the number one buyers of advertising in the United States. 85% of all spending for all commercials in a non-election year is Big Pharma. And every state senator, state assemblyman, state governor, and every federal senator and every federal congressman, people who run for president, the number one donor is going to be the pharmaceutical industries. And so when they have something like Vioxx, which killed 50,000 people, that's just the price of doing business for them. And so when you give them blanket liability, interestingly, the COVID vaccine doesn't go in any countries where the government doesn't give them blanket liability protection. In other words, if they can get sued by people, they're not going in there. And so that's a real sign. And Bobby Kennedy understands that you can't have somebody who used to be in charge of the vaccine division at the CDC, Julie Gerberding, leave the CDC, where she was overseeing the vaccine manufacturers and regulations, and then going to Merck and being in charge of the vaccine division for Merck. It's just outrageous corruption. And so the only politician who's talking about stopping that is Bobby Kennedy. So we need to talk about more things that can make people healthier and stop this insanity. And it doesn't make people healthier; it makes them sicker. And for the pharmaceutical companies to be able to shut down the world over this, George, is very alarming. And I think they'll not think twice about doing it again.
And of course, they are the number one funders of the news programs that are, surprise, surprise, never allowing any debate on these subjects.
Well, they don't want to have debate because they already have it, wrapped up. If anything, I think what's happened was whenever you have potential profitability that has no end to it. In other words, if you're a drug company and let's say you make a product like Vioxx, which they did, which killed at least 50,000 people. Now that's going to, at a certain point, go generic. However, for like the vaccine schedule, and why it was so important for the vaccine makers to get the COVID-19 approved for children, because if they get it on the child schedule for approved vaccines, then they have no liability ever. And so then they can't be sued by anybody. And so the only way to sue them is if there is fraud. And frankly, I think there was fraud, and I think they did. So I do think that, but unless you have, attorney generals from different states that are going to go after the companies and go after, if they didn't go after Purdue, who killed so many people with OxyContin and gave them a sweetheart deal, then you just don't expect them to go after anybody. So until there's somebody convicted, or until there's a murder charge for the heads of from the board of trustees of Pfizer or the CEO, until there's something where they feel they're going to actually have to pay a price, then I think this is going to continue. That's why it's important to, whatever happens to Bobby Kennedy's, how far he goes, the fact that he's talking about this at all can't be ignored. And they're ignoring him on ABC, NBC, CBS, ABC, all the traditional garbage mainstream media. But he's getting on, like you said yourself, George, he's getting on. There are these alternative forms of communicating to the people now, and it's exploding. and so people will have ways
Yeah,
of getting this new information.
with bigger audiences. With bigger
Yeah.
audiences. One of the many bon mots that he has spoken recently was this one, that comedians used to be more funny before they started towing the government's line. What happened to your industry, Rob? It seems like only yesterday where comedians punched upwards instead of punching downwards, entirely
Well,
in the grain with the prevailing orthodoxy. What happened?
well, I think if George Carlin was alive today, I think that they would be accusing him of being a right winger, because you have to
Yeah.
understand that 95% of Hollywood are liberals. And I don't think that they believe in all of it. But the problem with this ideology is it is a religion. And if you question any of it, then you get kicked out. So there's a real fear. I mean, the most interesting thing to me is, for me, I mean, I have to attack it because I just feel like anytime you have to go against the power. And the power is this woke ideology, and it's a liberal thing where math, George, did you know math is racist now? Math scores, it's racist. 2 + 2 = 4. That could be racist. What did the 2 use the N-word? What did I miss? So you really have to, I mean, it's hard not to laugh at it, but you have universities now that used to teach people how to think. Like Richard Feynman used to say, teach them how to think. Teach kids how to think critically, how to question the science. And now you have university kids that are not being taught to think. They're taught to be advocates to a partisan policy that is this liberal wokeness. So where does it go? But comedians, I think it's easier to just, make fun of Trump. I mean, he makes fun of himself. It's easy. I think it's much tougher to go after the power base, which is this liberal intelligentsia, which is, to me, is the looniest thing going now. I mean, the fact that, as a friend of mine, Mike Merrifield said, if I wish I had a dime for every gender there was, I'd have 20 cents. So
no, it's 97 actually. It's 90. It's 97 on this side of the pond. Now, in a way, on that subject, Rob, I'm a socialist. I'm someone that would normally be described as on the left, and I have 5 mixed-race children, but I'm now accused of being on the right because I'm not a liberal. I've never been a liberal. Liberalism and socialism are 2 different things as far as I'm concerned. But I was looking at your political track record, as it were. You were a Democrat when the Democrats purported, at least, to be the party of the working class, or you call it the middle class over there. And then you became a Republican, and now you've become an independent. Is this because it's really a uni party that Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and all these people, they really are in the same party, aren't they?
It is what you're exactly, George. You're talking about an establishment. I mean, the reason why they don't attack Mike Pence, who's very attackable, is that because he is, at least as loathsome as he is to the liberals, at least he's still part of that establishment, which they are very much a part of. He is not a threat to shaking up that establishment and to their money system. You have, Mitch McConnell and Dianne Feinstein. These people can barely converse anymore. And Joe Biden, I don't know what drugs they give him, for the debates, but he's not there anymore. And that's not a secret. But they don't care, because what it really is just continuing the same establishment power base. And that's why Bobby Kennedy is so interesting, because he doesn't fit in there. I mean, traditional liberalism, if you look at it, it's women's rights, it's gay rights, it's civil rights, it's free speech. It's for giving people an opportunity, to not guaranteeing them the same outcome, which is how this is kind of turned into. There's no guarantee for the same outcome. You have people from the same households that don't do equally as well. But you have what it is now. You have a perversion of this traditional liberalism, which is really Marxist in its sense. I mean, traditional liberalism is the way we should all be. It is for freedom. It's for trying your best, but it's not for guaranteeing anything. The thing about, like, as you know, as your countryman Winston Churchill said, you know, democracy is a very ugly business. I mean, it's a very messy form of government, but it sure beats the hell out of all others, if I can kind of bastardize his quote. But what we're really dealing with now is an exclusion and to debate. We're no longer talking about what's the best idea. And like with socialism at its best is to rein in capitalism, which capitalism at its work. If you take a look at capitalism, you don't have to go very far. Just go to the Museum of History in Illinois, and you'll see capitalist signs for slavery. You know, we'll buy this human being and we'll carry the interests. So that is the zenith of capitalism, and the zenith of socialism also takes away the incentives and didn't work for. It was a failed system. With, you know, and even the communists would say that it's not true communism. It was socialism on the way to trying to have a utopia. But anytime, George, you're trying to find that utopia, like the liberals are trying for now, you're headed for disaster. And not just disaster, but if you take a look at what that really ends up to, it's mass murder. We're really talking about people, you know, being murdered, excluded, demonized, and killed. I mean, if you would have had people during this pandemic, if you would have really taken what they said, and I'm talking about the little Hitlers that I've alluded to in my industry, embarrassingly so, George Clooney, Sean Penn, you know, the Jimmy Kimmel, these people who said, like, these people, if you come in and you're unvaccinated, you should not be treated at a hospital. Your Piers Morgan. I don't remember anybody apologizing for these quotes. But if you think about that, that's not too distant from the Hutus and it's the Hutus and the Hutus or whatever killing each other. So you have to be really careful when we start demonizing people, because I always believed that, you know, for the last 30 years, I think it's Daniel Goldberg who wrote Hitler's Willing Executioners, and he was saying there is this false assumption that our society was just like Germany, but then these economic situations came in and then they just found the scapegoat. And he said, no, that's not true. He said, there's always been a cornerstone of anti-Semitism as a foundational belief system in Europe. Now, I would correct that and say there needs to be a new edition. There is always going to be an element of society that's going to scapegoat people and use them for the excuses of what's happening, and to blame people, and to potentially murder these people en masse. And I would say that as we head into 223, if you go back 100 years and see where the world was, they were just putting Hitler in prison. So we were heading towards a calamitous time economically, which also created another gigantic war that murdered and killed 100 million people plus. So I do think that we are as susceptible to the world then if certain economic conditions appear. That's why it's so important to make sure that you have a systems of government that is truly representative of the people. And I don't believe we have that. I believe that that's under threat in the United States underneath the Democrats right now.
Now, we both had friendly relations with the late and great Larry King. I wonder if Larry was here today, whether he would concur with Tucker Carlson's statement today that within a year, a hot war between the U.S. and Russia will be joined. Do you have that fear also?
Well, for people, it's easy. It's very easy to look back at history and say, you know, it's the de facto bad guy for the United States. It's always Russia. When truthfully, if you look at Russia has the same GDP and the same domestic income, gross domestic income as the state of Texas. They're not going anywhere. They're not. Their idea of expansion is to defend their borders. Is not to come and the lie of the Democratic Party right now, of the Democratic, the neoliberal intelligentsia, is that Putin wants to come back and take over Europe, and that's just nonsense. What Putin wants to do is protect its borders. I mean, going back now to where under Gorbachev, under Bush 1, he was told by James Baker, and I believe, Robert Kennedy talks about this, but he said not 10 feet into past Poland, not into Poland. They didn't have that in part of the treaty, but it was a word that was given to James Baker that NATO would not go into Poland. And now they're just butted up right against pointing missiles at Russia and Ukraine. Now, I would just say to people in the United States and people in England that are listening to this, imagine if China put missiles in Mexico pointed toward Texas. They wouldn't stay there for more than 36 hours. They'd be wiped out. You can't do that. And so for some reason, how the diplomatic policy from NATO and from the United States and these neoliberal warmongers think that that's okay. Putin is not going to allow that. We have to figure out, it's like in any divorce, George, you're not going to get 100% what you want, and she's not going to get 100% what she wants. You're going to have to come to some sort of middle ground where you can maintain the peace. And I'm sorry, Ukraine is not going to get everything it wants. And I know from what Bobby Kennedy told me that they would have gone into peace negotiations with Russia, but they were completely they were subverted by the United States. And Zelensky was told through the
agency of Boris Johnson. He was dispatched to Kiev to scupper a draft peace agreement that had been reached in Turkey between Zelensky and the Russian government.
Now, that is a crime against humanity. I mean, for people to kind of get it, when I tell people, because it's so easy, and I understand the sympathy, and I have the sympathy. My grandmother is from the Ukraine. I have the sympathy for the Ukraine and wanting them to have their independence. However, we have over 350,000 Ukrainians died. That's the equivalent to 7 times the amount of American deaths that happened in Vietnam. And the Vietnamese lost 1 million. So you're talking about a potential for this thing to become a hot war. I don't think it is unreasonable. And I don't think that the Democrats fear it. I think unfortunately, I think that they would like it, because then they could just whip up America into this war fervor that we have done for so many times. And that I admit that I got caught up into after 9/11, and thankfully that you were one of the few individuals that stood up and against a tide of warmongers to step up. And that's why I really admire you. To step up and to say something. And that's why it's important now for me to step up and to be vocal about and to support Bobby Kennedy and campaign for him, because I think we need to have someone who's going to say, and I don't know about DeSantis. Nikki Haley is another Republican candidate. She's pro-war. I don't know DeSantis, but I haven't heard him say that he would stop that war. You have a guy like Vivek Ramaswamy, and then he was saying like a horrible thing that no one's jumped on. He was saying, we'll support Taiwan up until we have enough independence in our semiconductors, making chips. Like, what? That's it? So I just have no faith in any of the mainstream leaders now. We do need to step up, and people need to have their voices heard. If we do have a hot war, it's going to be ugly.
The business,
and there could be limited nuclear war.
Well, this might be the last time we talk if it's a hot war. Have you seen Oppenheimer?
Unbelievable. Well, it makes you realize what you're dealing with. And you are dealing with something that they considered could be the end of the world. They thought maybe there could be a chain reaction which just engulfs the planet in flames. I mean, that is something that they still went for. So you cannot discount these neocons who I believe do not have a soul. These are soulless horrible human beings that would not think twice about the people on the front lines that would die. But it does count on us. It does count on the citizens of the UK and the United States to be silent, to sit there and just go along with it. If we have, what I do think we need to really do is we need to have a real shutdown. We need to have a real strike of people. And that is something that needs to happen and be coordinated on, so that if they're going to move forward and really push Putin and Putin is, he's not a good guy by any means, but pushing him to a corner where he feels this could become a hot war. And then there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. There's only been one country that's ever used it, and that's the United States. So this will be something that you would have to retaliate. And then once retaliation happened, the cat's out of the bag. When do you stop the retaliation? And the idea that nuclear cloud, it will stay. The United States under Eisenhower, all the Joint Chiefs of Staff approved a nuclear strike, a plan. And I could be wrong. I'm sorry. I could have been under Truman, but I believe it was under Eisenhower that approved a strike of 200 nuclear bombs to wipe out the USSR. And it was approved by all of them. And it was Eisenhower. I believe it was Eisenhower turned it down. And these idiots, these psychopaths, had no idea that after those 200 bombs were in Russia, within 36 hours, that nuclear cloud would be over the United States and the rest of Europe and everywhere. So these are psychotic
well, look
people.
at that. Look at that. Exactly. Look at that weather balloon, the Chinese weather balloon, and think of nuclear weapons, which are 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb that Oppenheimer made and which was exploded over Hiroshima. Tell us finally, Rob, what you're working on now. We've dragged you off the set. You're directing something these days, yeah?
I'm just finishing a film for Paramount Plus called Amor, and we filmed it. There's a strike now, but I'm a director, and the directors have settled that part of the strike. I'm finishing that, and I'm working on a book, and that's the Conspiracy Theorists Handbook, Volume 1, and that's what I'm working on. And I would just say, as far as the United States needs to,
I wish I'd thought of that one.
Bobby Kennedy wants to talk about taking personal responsibility. What can you do? You can grow your own food. You can get healthy yourself. You can not have to be reliant on the medical industrial system, and getting people healthy. Because the thing about the Chinese, they don't even have to bomb us. All they have to do is wait us out. I mean, we have 59% of our sperm count is down. We have 65% of Americans are obese. We're allergic to everything. They don't even have to drop bombs out of that. All they need to do is those balloons just drop peanuts and gluten. That will wipe us out in 36 hours. So, but I'm also buoyant, and I'm positive, and I do believe that if enough people raise their voice, we can stop this oncoming war and this tide of war. And I think that I think hopefully that the world is sick of it, and more people like yourselves were having a voice and being listened to. And I thank you for that. And you're one of my heroes. You have been a staunch anti-war, and you're also a person who speaks the truth. And in spite of what that can cost you, and you have been a guide for me. So I'm grateful to you, George.